and welcome to Right to Know Day with the Information Commissioner's Office. Thank you for your patience. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we're ready now. And my name is Gitanjali Gutierrez. I'm the Information Commissioner. And tonight we're celebrating International Right to Know Day at Bermuda College with our program Information in Action. So we'd like to welcome everyone who's here with our audience live, and also everyone who's joining us on the live streams, both through Bermemes and with Bernews. Tonight, we join over 115 countries with laws giving people access to information. This allows people to ask public bodies about what they're doing, how they make decisions, how they're spending money, and what they're doing on behalf of the public. This right, the right to ask for information, the right to know, is one of the most powerful rights in a democracy. Before the PADI Act, the Public Access to Information Act in Bermuda, you could go into a government department in a lot of situations and ask for a document or ask for a record, and it was often up to the department whether or not to give you the record. Now, we have a right to ask for information, a right to ask for records that public bodies have, and here we have over 200 public bodies. You can ask them for all kinds of records: emails, photographs, maps, memos, post-it notes, reports, any kind of thing that records information you can ask for under the PADI Act. Sometimes this information needs to be kept confidential so the public body can do its work. And the reasons for keeping records confidential are listed in the PADI Act. A public body has to tell you which of these reasons it's relying on. But if the information doesn't fit within one of these reasons, you have a right to it. It has to be given to you. Making a PADI request under our PADI Act is free and it's easy. You ask for the record. If you're not happy with what you got, you ask again, and the head of a public body will look at your request. And if at that point, if you aren't happy, you can appeal. You can ask me, the Information Commissioner, to look at what the public body did, what information they gave you, what they didn't give you, and we'll audit it. We'll look and see if the public authority complied with the PADI Act or whether you still have a right to that record. And if you do, it's a right. The Information Commissioner will order the public authority to release the record to you. It's a great right on paper, the right to know, the right to ask for information. It sounds terrific, and we have a lot of great slogans throughout the world to talk about the right to know. Information is the currency of a democracy. The right to know is the right to live. But what does this really mean? What is the real power of information? And that is our topic for tonight: information in action. We know that we can get information now under the PADI Act. So we know we can get these documents or get these records, photographs, reports, and put them in our hands. But what happens after that? What do we do with what we know? Our panelists tonight were invited because of the role that information plays in their work and the power that they know information has to shape, transform, and inspire. So we'd like to thank Bermuda College for letting us set up tonight and for letting us participate here. And I'd like to introduce our panelists we have with us tonight. First, we have Sam Strangeways from the Royal Gazette, a senior journalist. Jonathan Starling from Greenrock. And we have Qian Dickinson from Bermemes. And each of them is going to talk to us about how they've either used the PADI Act, the power of information in their work. And we'll start with Sam. The Royal Gazette launched a campaign in 2008. Is that correct? The right to know, giving people power. Yeah. They were actively involved in advocating and encouraging the passage of the Public Access to Information Act. What we now have is the PADI Act. The newspaper has been involved in a very, very long time, recognizing the importance of access to information for journalists. They had gone through a campaign and contacted politicians and advocates, both here and throughout the world, to support the passage of the PADI Act, as well as the right to know. Since that time, the Royal Gazette has been engaged in using the PADI Act, and we're joined by one of their senior reporters here tonight to discuss with us her work and how the PADI Act has affected it. So, Sam, let me start with just a very basic question about how, just fundamentally, how has getting access to information changed the way that you are engaged in journalism?
It has changed. It has changed my work, definitely. Should I have this in front of me? A little bit of background. Good evening, everyone, first of all. I came to Bermuda about 11 and a half years ago, and I came from the UK. So when I left the UK, I was a journalist there, and freedom of information was just quite a new thing there. There'd been an act passed there, and then it had taken a long time to be implemented, and it had just come into force, I think, shortly before I came, and I'd had some training in how to use it. But then when I got here, I found there wasn't freedom of information here, and I became very interested in the idea of how that could, impact the job that I was trying to do here. Hence the campaign that Gita referred to, and so we campaigned for it, and happily it was passed. And then I think 5 years later it was implemented, or came into force. And since then, so I've been using it for about 2 years. I think I made my first request in about December of 2015. It has changed the way I work in a practical way, in the sense that I now have a lot more paperwork and a lot more admin, and I need to be a lot more organized about that. It's a lot to manage because I make a lot of requests, and intellectually, it's also just opened up a world of possibilities for me, and that's what's so exciting about it. That I don't have time to make all the requests that I want to make, and it's probably the same for most journalists here. But I'm always thinking now every day with each story. I mean, I could go through the newspaper every day, and pretty much most stories I could just think, what could we be asking for about this to actually know more and to get to the heart of a story? So it's one of the tools that we use. I think journalists have an arsenal of tools, and the most important one is probably just talking to people. But this adds to that. It doesn't do everything for us, and I can talk about that a bit more, about how, I think your question in a sense presupposed that we are getting more information. We are to some degree, and in another way we're not necessarily. But the possibility is there, and the law is on our side in theory as the media. So that's just great. It's just great that we know we can access the law in that way. So I think that's the main thing. And the other thing, I think, I wanted to say that I don't think in the 2.5 years that PADI's been in force, I wouldn't say there's been a sea change in the culture of government here and public authorities here. And I guess that's because this change comes slowly. So, we're not seeing, they all have information statements, and there's lots of them out there and you can read them. But beyond those, I'm not necessarily seeing sort of like a publication scheme where I can just go to stuff. And maybe there's a little more, but it seems to me like it's a very slow process, this. And so, I feel it's our role in the media to keep chipping away at this. And the more we do and the more we get, and then it becomes more normal, and then, that's my hope. Does that answer?
Yeah, do you want to say something a little bit more about what you mean by publication scheme for people that don't know?
Yes, sure. I guess by having the PADI Act, and I don't know the wording of the law, but I presume somewhere in there, or it's usually the case, that it will say that authorities should proactively put out there the information that they can. So instead of waiting for requests, they would try and just share as much information regularly, and that just becomes the norm for them. I guess that's what a publication scheme means. And there is one here, right, within the, but I don't know where, for example, I think when it came into force, there was something about every authority every year was going to have to publish the number of contracts that they had engaged in over $50,000. I think I might not be exact on that. Right. I think the BTA has done that to its credit. I don't know. I haven't kept total tabs on it because I'm obviously dealing with a lot of stories, but I wouldn't say that's happening across the board. I certainly don't think the 200 authorities that we've got have published that. So it would be nice to see that as time goes on. But of course we can ask for it, and anyone can ask for it. So if there's a public authority that interests you, or that you have a dealing with for some reason, then you could find out that stuff now, in theory. In theory.
Do you have an example of any of the requests that you've made that you could talk about, that the paper's made that you can talk about, that you think have been the most exciting or the most interesting or the most perhaps frustrating?
Yeah, I wanted to, as I was sort of thinking about this talk tonight, I wanted to come up with a sort of list of successful requests. But I don't know that there's been that many. I think we have had there's been some positive stuff, and one I would mention, and it might not sound that exciting, but we went to the charity commissioners for some information, for some minutes actually, and they're a body that basically is appointed by the government, and it's a body of volunteers, but they look at whether charities ought to retain a charitable status. And we went to them for some minutes, and they sent the minutes back, and the minutes were redacted, which means that they were a lot of it you couldn't see. All you could see was the specific issue that I was interested in. And when I got that back, I kind of thought, well, this doesn't make sense to me, because this is a body that we're effectively, we're all funding it, and it's working for us, and so we should be able to read its minutes. In my view, those minutes should be published as soon as possible after every meeting. So I made the process is you make the party request, and then as the Information Commissioner said, you could, if you don't get what you want, you can then seek a review of that. And I did seek a review of that, and the head of that authority, the chairman of the commissioners, he was really open to, I think, looking at that carefully and considering my request. And he eventually did release the minutes, and they weren't redacted. And I've since gone back and asked for more minutes and got them full minutes that shows everything that they're talking about there. I think their monthly meetings. And I just think, and I know that doesn't sound exciting, but it actually is exciting for me, because it shows that this information is there and that we have the right to it. And so, that was one where I was really, really pleased about it. Other ones, I don't, I remember you saying when the law sort of came into force, I remember you saying there will be a big story that will, that it will be the big party story, like the MP's expenses. Mm-hmm. That every journalist would want to get here. I don't think that's happened yet. Mm-hmm. But maybe that's as well because for us it's a learning curve as reporters, and we're learning to phrase our requests well. Because although it is easy, you just fill out a form and you take it along. So it's easy to do that, but you also have to think carefully. And somebody said to me this week at a public authority, they said, that party request you put in, you could have worded it a lot better. And you could have taken more time of that, and you would have got more. And I thought, wow, yeah, that's probably true of so many of my requests. Where because on a daily newspaper, the news cycle is so quick, and every day you kind of just, okay, what can I find out about that? Dash it off, send it. But in fact, even just the way you word something can really impact that. So I've had some successes. I have had some good information back, and I think that there is somewhat of the change is coming, I think, because I noticed this year, this wasn't under Patty, but I noticed that the primary schools released I think it might have been last year, they released their test results. And I don't remember that happening before. And we were able to do a kind of league table. I mean, you may not agree with the league table for primary schools, but we were able to actually look at the results and to see which ones were performing in certain tests that they do. And I don't remember that happening before, and we hadn't asked for that. That was just something that they proactively, the Department of Education, I guess, decided to do. And I thought, okay, so maybe this is just part of a wider change, and I thought that was a really good thing.
So if someone was going to be making their first Patty request tomorrow, what would be Sam Strangeways' top 2 or 3 tips?
Oh my goodness. Well, I make a lot. I wanted to count how many I've made, but I just ran out of time to do that. And I wanted to have those sort of statistics to say how many I'd got stuff back. But then, like the authorities that I'm often sending these requests to, I was short on time and resources, and I couldn't. Sure. So the one thing I would say is, take your time. I mean, I'm working on a daily deadline. And so often I don't perhaps take as much time as I should. But take your time, carefully think, just think it through. What do you think they might hold, or what do you know in many cases? What do you know that they hold? Because people are often telling me about documents that exist within government, And I'm like, wow, really? Like, I wouldn't have known that that was there unless somebody shared that with me. So if you know that they would have something, word it carefully, you know, like, and make it really broad. So you want to ask for like all of something. And what's one of the ones where I've come unstuck, where I've asked for maybe correspondence, but I should have asked for communications or something where I would have got a wider.
Do you talk often with the public authorities? Do
yeah,
you talk with them to
some of them.
prepare them?
Some information officers are really, really helpful, and we'll actually come back to you. There's a great lady at the Ministry of Finance, for anyone who's interested, which is obviously a great ministry to be asking questions of, and she will come back and she'll say, you know, actually, I think you could get more if you worded it a certain way, and just trying to help me to understand what records that are actually held there. So I would do that too, or like even before you put it in, maybe try and talk to the information officer, and often they can be very forthcoming, and other times not so. I think those are the key things really for me.
I think from our perspective, we have a lot of information officers or requesters call and ask us questions about the process, and that's one of the things that we always encourage is at least make that first phone call, have that first conversation, because often the information officers are doing this on a voluntary basis. There's someone in the public authority that's come forward and said, I'll take this on, I'll handle these requests. They're doing an extra task at work, and as you said, most public authorities are under-resourced and understaffed right now.
Yeah.
And the ones who have come forward, what we've found, a good number of them have also a dedication to the idea of accountability and openness, and believe in the PADI Act. So that's good. That's good to hear.
I think there are some.
Of them. And you know, there's over 220 public authorities, so there's the spectrum of information officers. But I guess the ones who are really helping to make this work, when you have that good working relationship, it's a positive thing.
Yeah, and equally the heads of the authorities who look at those, because as you say, I only realised recently that it was voluntary for many of them, where they were, and some of them are just inundated, and I'm sure they see an email from me land in their inbox, and they're like, oh dear, like why are you on my case again looking for something? And I'm always doing it because I think there is a story to be had, or because I think there's a public interest in the information. So it's not, these things are not, I'm not doing them for a laugh, or sometimes people complain, in the comments under the line of the stories, well, this is just a fishing expedition, you're just trying to see, and it's like, well, yes, I suppose it is a kind of fishing expedition on behalf of the public to see about something that I think, is important. I remember one where somebody had said that, and it was one about this safety standards to do with childcare, to do with nurseries and schools and things like that. The Department of Environmental Health, as I understand it, or I think it's Environmental Health within the Department of Health, they, I think, are very under-resourced, and they, I think, have struggled with some of my PATA requests because of the way they file stuff. They simply are not. They're simply not prepared for the kind of information I'm asking for. But it's my fervent belief that the information I'm asking for is information that can help people and empower people and help parents make choices and things like that. And that's what we're trying to do when we do that, not just annoy people, which we're doing too, but that's not our aim.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you very much.